Hi everyone. Today we'll see what are the different building blocks of blockchain network, Bitcoin in particular. So what are these blocks or technologies which were used to build a network like Bitcoin? And ultimately we'll see how do they combine to build the entire network. So for getting into what is blockchain and what is Bitcoin, what are the networks and so on and so forth, let's first try to understand why there was a need for a Bitcoin like network and why Satoshi Nakamoto thought about it. Right. So, in our day-to-day work or day-to-day life, financial intermediaries plays a major role. So, whether you want to deposit money, there is only one place where you can do that, like bank. And if you want to borrow money, you can do it from bank. So, the entire system is built around that. And let's say if I want to transfer some money to you, so I have to go via the intermediary. So intermediary will first check whether the request which they receive is valid or not, or whether I have that money which I want to transfer to you. And ultimately, they will update the lasers for both of us. Like your laser will go up and my laser will go down. So that's the entire role of intermediaries. So they might or might not charge money for that, but the entire data has to go through them. So why do they exist? Is because we need someone whom we can trust and who can validate all the requests coming in and coming out so that there is no dispute in future. Right? But if you remember 2008, so 2008 is very infamous for financial crisis. And if you look into the reasons, it was originated by the financial intermediaries themselves. So at the time, they disbursed mortgage loans to whoever was coming in without checking the credibility or without assessing the risk. If you see, we deposited money to financial intermediaries to take care of that part so that they can give money to only those people who deserve it and not to someone who might deserve it. But intermediaries fail to do that. In order to increase their profits, they gave loan to each and every. And finally, the entire financial system broke down. At the time, people like Satoshi Nakamoto, they thought that the cause of issue is financial intermediaries and they are just there for building the trust. So what if we can replace these financial intermediaries with a computational power? Let's assume that for a particular bank ABC there are 100 customers and somehow these 100 customers can work in unity and they can bring in this validation and updation of ledgers and other things which intermediaries are doing now. So that's where Satoshi Nakamoto talk about the blockchain or the Bitcoin that was in 2008. So the first transaction which Satoshi did, he created 50 Bitcoins at 18:15:05 hours on 13th January 2009. So if we see this 3rd January 2009, so it's very particular day. So there was a news article in the Times of UK where the headline was that chancellor or brink of second bailout for banks. So basically, government funded these banks, though they brought down the financial system. And this particular article was the part of data which Satoshi put as the first block, which we call as Genesis block in Bitcoin language. Okay, so let's move forward. So Satoshi didn't invent many of the things. Rather, he used what were pre-existing technologies and sort of brought down them to the network. Okay. The first of those things is digital signatures. Digital signatures are nothing but a way to vouch for the content or whatever message or data is going out. someone has to vouch for it, and digital signature is a way. So there are typically two kind of digital signatures which are being used or were being used in 2008 2009. The first one is being symmetric, where let's say I want to transfer data from person A to person B, which is encrypted. So now, in order for person B to decrypt the data sent by, he needs a key. Right? So a key is nothing but with which this data was encrypted. So person B will require that key. And in the connected world where I'm sitting in India and sending data to someone sitting in USA, I'll have to send this key somehow over electronic mediums, right? So there is always a chance of being hacked or someone intentionally getting into the data where they are not required to and reading the confidential information, right? So the Satoshi used the second version of digital signatures, which is called as asymmetric digital signatures. There is a set of private and public keys. So basically, both person A and person B will have a set of private and public keys. So let's say I'm sending the same data from person A to person B, and now person B wants to validate whether the data actually came from person A or not. So while sending the data, what person A will do, he will sign the data with his private key, and in asymmetric nature of digital signatures, public key of sender is always known. So a receiver can validate whether it came from sender or not. He might or might not be able to decrypt the data, but just for validation, he can validate whether the data which is received, it came from someone whose public key he knows. Right. So that's the idea. So there is no concept of key which you have to send, and there's no chance of being hacked. So for example, let's say I'm sending the data, and for the sake of simplicity, the private key is, let's say, an even number, and public key is a lot of function which is, let's just say that whether modular 2 is 0 or not. So it's not the way it happens in reality, it's just for explanation. So person A validate or like the signed the data with his private key, which is an even number. And in public, he has already told that I will always sign my data with an even number so that someone who wants to validate, they can check whether it's modulo 2 equals 0 or not. So in a way, receiver can validate it directly whether it came from the sender or not. Right. So the idea behind it. Now, so this is the idea for validation, but what if I want to decrypt the data? Right. So as in the same example, I'm sending the data to person B, and now in this case, data will be encrypted with the public key of the receiver. So repeating again, public key of each and every participant is known to the entire network. So when person A is sending data to person B, he will sign it with the public key of the receiver. So the way it's encrypted is that though it's signed with public key, but it can only be decrypted with the private key of the receiver. And private key is something which is only known to the receiver. So in this case, only receiver can decrypt the data. So this is the first building block of Bitcoin network. Summarizing, each and every node or each and every party in a Bitcoin network has a set of private and public keys. Private key, as the name suggests, is confidential and kept with the person himself. So there are people who have like engraved their private keys on metals and kept them locked and so on and so forth. But The point being, private key is always confidential, while public key is something which is broadcasted and everybody knows. So if we just want to validate whether a message or data came from a particular person, what is claimed, whether this is true or not, you just need the public key of that person. With that, you can just verify whether the message which you have received could have been sent by someone who has this public key, right? So this is the validation part. But let's say if I want to decrypt the data and I want to send data to you. So now, since I know your public key, I will encrypt data with your public key in such a way that it can only be decrypted by your private key. Since your private key is private to you, so you are the only one who can decrypt the data. Okay, so that's about digital signature with the first building block. Other blocks we'll see in the other videos. Thank you.